And you can hear my audio?
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our regular board meeting for Wednesday, July 12th, 2023. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge with gratitude that for thousands of years, the Quw'utsun, Malahat, Subasit, Halalt, Penelakut, Staminas, Layaxan, Paucachin, Didadat, and Pachidat peoples have walked gently on the unceded territories where we live and work. Our meeting today is being held on the unceded territory of the Quw'utsun people and Cowichan tribes, and I know we're also grateful to be here. With that, we will call the meeting to order. Before we go to the approval of the agenda, Ms. Boyd, are there any changes to the agenda today?
No, Chair, no changes to the agenda.
Great, so we'll move on
Great.
with the adoption of the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Moved by Director Abbott, seconded by Director Justice. Just like saying it. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Ms. Boyd.
Thank you. Number 2, we have a regular board meeting of June 28th meeting minutes to be adopted.
If there are no errors or omissions, a motion to adopt those minutes. Moved by Director Douglas, second by Director Staples. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries.
Thank you. We are on 3, business arising from minutes. There are none. We have next public input period. This is a total of 15 minutes with each person having 3 minutes allocated. The purpose of the public input period is to provide public opportunity to comment on an item on the agenda before the board that considers the item.
Any folks for public input in the gallery today? None. Well, welcome for those in the gallery. Nice to see you. Ms. Boyd.
Thank you, Chair. Moving on, 7, we do not have any correspondence.
I was just report of the chairperson.
Sorry, I did have that highlighted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I just wanted to take a moment at report of the chairperson. I'll hold this up in front of the camera, but there's a wonderful book that's been produced, led by Cowichan Lake River and River Stewardship Society, but with many contributors, and I'll hold it up to the screen there so that people at home can see, Witnessing the Water, an authentic relationship. And it's an amazing book that's full of great pictures and stories and testimonials about our connection to the waters of these lands, their important functions within our ecosystems, and the important cultural and sociological connections that we have to water. I think everyone should read this book if they are given the opportunity. And I'm going to steal a quote from it because I'm not as eloquent as the contributors to this book. And I hope my friend Tom Rutherford won't get mad at me for stealing this, but I couldn't say it better. And his quote is, "Sitting beside the river that defines us as a community, a river that has nurtured and been nurtured by the Quw'utsun Mistimu, the Cowichan people, for millennia. A river that brings us together as it flows through our lives, linking headwaters to deep water, ancestors to future generations, and the past to what lies ahead. A river that will sustain us in an uncertain future if we listen carefully to what it tells us, our river." And that's from Tom Rutherford, who's still consulting, but has been an important figure within the Cowichan Watershed Board and the greater stewardship community in our region. But I just want to give my deep gratitude to the Cowichan Lake and River Stewardship Society, all the contributors to this book. We were given 4 copies as a supporter. We're going to keep a couple copies in our offices here for people to look at, and also hopefully be able to share some with the visitor center so that folks coming to the community can see it, hopefully connect with the river, and hopefully purchase a copy at their local bookstore. If it's not there, tell them to get it in. I just, respecting especially the area directors from areas A, B, C, D, and E that have contributed funding and have deep relationships to the river. I didn't know if any of you wanted to say a few words before we move on with our agenda. Director Nicholson.
Well, I would like to thank the Cowichan Lake and River Stewardship Society. They do amazing work. They produce this, and it is a fundraiser for them. So the sales of the book are, and I did confirm it's at volume 1 and 10 old books. Is that the name? Yeah. And yeah, it make great Christmas presents, people.
Not that we promote things too much here, but especially products, but this is a little bit different than that. It's a really important piece. I see Director Morrison online, so I will go to Director Morrison. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is this has been a passion project for, and I'm going to name her Judy Braden. And for those of you that know Judy, you should be so lucky to have an individual like that who's passionate about our environment, arts, and this project. And I really have been impressed with how the Cowichan Lake and River Stewardship Society approaches their role in the community as one of the many cogs of concerned folks throughout our region. And this is a very innovative way of them looking to be relevant, to be financially stable and secure, and to be doing things a little differently. And I'm raising this for a specific reason. Yes, the taxpayers of Area F contributed to this, as to Area I and a number of other regions. But this is so that they can be sustaining into the future and not be a regular applicant for funding for their basic operations. These are a committed bunch of people that don't have offices. They work out of their homes. They meet in free places to have their meetings. And I think this book and the sale of this book will contribute to a long-standing, sustainable funding approach that you don't often see amongst groups that are trying to be current and relevant in our communities. So I really want to tip my hat and say thank you to all of the people in that organization that work so hard to put this together. And I hope that sales are strong, and that, as Director Nicholson had recommended, I think these make great gifts for folks. And with that, I just want to say again, thanks to the CLRSS for the great work that they did in putting this together. It's a fantastic product. Thanks.
Thank you. Any others before we move on with the agenda? Director Deck.
I would just like to tell everyone how hard people worked on this project. My husband, who's sitting in the audience today, is currently president of Cowichan Lake and River Stewardship Society, and I've seen firsthand how he and the others, a small group of really passionate, committed people, have created such a beautiful product. And again, I'd like to concur with Ian about Judy Braden. It was passionate for her. She had to get this done, and she enlisted lots of support, willing support. So yes, I think it's wonderful that the watershed is seen through a wide lens, from the forest to the ocean, and yeah, I'd just like to thank all those folks for working so hard.
Great, thank you. And Director Abbott.
Thank you, Chair. I echo the previous comments, but I will encourage the staff and team at the Visitor Center and the Chamber of Commerce to have a couple of display copies. Their shelf space is somewhat limited, I gather, and they maintain that a lot of visitors are traveling through on their way north. But regardless, I think it's a gem, and we need to get the Visitor Center to get people off the TC and headed up to the headwaters of the Cowichan River, Heritage River. So thank you for all the effort, and kudos to Judy and the gang.
Thank you very much. I would share and echo all the sentiments that have been shared on the book and the work of those groups. So thank you very much. We'll move on. Ms. Boyd.
Thank you, Chair. We're no correspondence and no information. We move to number 9, committee commission reports. Report and recommendations of the Committee of the Whole meeting of June 28th. Director Morrison.
Go ahead, Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I believe all of these items have been published in advance and would, unless there's any that need to be pulled, I would move all the items listed in CR1.
Great, thank you. Any items to be pulled? Seeing none, it's been moved by Director Morrison, seconded by Director McClinton. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Anybody who wants to look at what that was, go back to the Committee of the Whole video from our last meetings, and you'll see them there. Ms. Boyd.
Thank you, Chair. We are CR2, report and recommendations from the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of July 5th with Director Wilson.
Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. These recommendations 1 through 5. First of all, is there any number of those that you would like to pick? Director Nicholson,
Director Nicholson, go
Could you
ahead.
move, pull 5, please?
number 5. Okay, then, any more that need to be pulled for discussion? No? In that case, I'm happy to move 1 through 4, and I can read those out in a voice that's guaranteed to send you all to sleep, or I can just say, do we approve 1 through 4 with the exception of 5?
So-
No. Actually, I queried that. It should, number 5 covers all of that. Yeah.
Okay. So number 5 is actually 5 and 6.
It's actually 5.6.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It looks like.
We still haven't figured out the
Yeah.
formatting in Prime Gov.
Yeah, it's 5.6.
Okay, thank
So
you.
I move 1 through 4.
All right, do we have a seconder for that? Seconded by Director Segal. Any discussion on 1 through 4? And I believe this is for all directors. Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. And to see those discussions, you can go back to last week's Electoral Area Services Committee
Thank you,
meeting
Mr. Chair. And
and
that
watch
just
the video.
leaves number 5 to be discussed. Director Nicholson.
Should we move it first?
Yeah, do we have a mover? Moved by Director Morrison, seconded by Director Wilson, and to Director Nicholson.
Thank you. So this is about the Poldy Comprehensive Development, and it was originally rezoned to a comprehensive development back in around 2006, I believe. And it's comprehensive development that is, I think, planning for about 500 residences. So it's a fairly significant development, approximately halfway between the Duncan and the town of Lake Cowichan, in the middle of sort of the edges of Satlam, I guess. And it at one time was a village, but there really isn't very much there now except the Sikh temple. And I am very concerned. What we're asked to vote on today is basically a housekeeping, it's part of the process of this development happening. But there are 3 owners of the properties for this development, and it seems to me that we're putting this development in piece by piece, and it's somewhat dependent on whether there will be enough water in the end. And Cowichan Tribes now has an interest in accessing some of the water because they plan to, I think their treaty lands will include some of the Crown land up in that area. So I am very uncomfortable about this development. I've always wondered whether it made sense at all, but it strikes me that if you can't get an economy of scale with a comprehensive development that actually is going to provide people with the servicing they need, then all you're doing is contributing to more sprawl, which we know is not the right thing to do in today's time. So I think there needs to be a larger discussion about this. I think this speaks directly to why we need a regional growth strategy. And I just wanted to put that out there because I am very uncomfortable at this point.
Thank you. I've got a little bit of a speakers list. Anyone who's in the room wish to speak to it? Director Staples and Justice, Douglas, Manhas. Wow. Okay.
Chair, may I add one more thing?
Yeah, I'm still making my speakers list, so you still have the floor. Anyone else while Director Nicholson finishes?
I think it would be wise for us to invite the provincial water authorization staff to come and have a conversation about this particular area and what they think in terms of water in the future. Because, we know right now we're sitting in a drought period and it's only going to get worse. So we really need to get our heads around this. And that requires us to have a conversation with them. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Before I go to my speakers list, do we have relevant staff in the room that may be able to respond to questions? It's about the Paldy one. Okay, thank you, Mr. Brown. I'm going to go to my speakers list then. I have Directors Morrison, Justice, Staples, Douglas, Manhas, and Toporowski. Go ahead, Director Morrison, from the disembodied voice elsewhere. You can look up on the screen, folks, if you need to see him. Go ahead, Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, we discussed this briefly at Electoral Area Services, and, I'm not going to get into debate. This is housekeeping. This is setting up the services that are, and they're completely well documented. The sufficiency certificates of sufficiency are there, and staff are also in the midst of preparing a report to bring electoral area services directors up to speed. So, I'm a little surprised that we're debating this at the board when this has been through committee. I think that it's more than appropriate for the new directors who, don't have anywhere near the time and tenure and exposure to this to be brought up to speed and to understand the nature of this. So I'm not going to get into the issues around water, which I think are non-issues. There's access to a source. As I said, I'm not going to go there. This is about giving staff what they've asked for and what the developers have asked for in the way of creating the services for them to be able to establish the type of intention of what was planned for this site when the previous owners had gone in and actually took out some density that was in there. There's a great plan for this. I'm sure others following me will talk about that, but this is really about establishing the services, and it's one of many steps in a series of steps that will ultimately see the return of a community in Paldy, which was once an important and thriving part of this community. So I'll stop there. I'll ask directors to support the resolution that has been passed by Electoral Area Services and allow for staff to come forward and inform directors about the much varied history of this application, which has been around longer than any of us, including me. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Directors Justice, then Staples, and more, but I'm just doing the next one on the list. Director Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm, excuse me, glad that Director Nicholson raised this. As a Muni director, I feel a little bit uncomfortable with land use issues. I fully realize that land use issues are in electoral areas are generally the province of Electoral Area Services Committee. But for whatever reason, the legislation gives Muni directors a vote on this, which also imposes on us a responsibility. And I acknowledge that these Paldy developments have been in the hopper for quite some time. However, it seems to me that much has changed in our understanding since these developments were conceived and first advanced. For example, we understand much more now about climate change, drinking water, and the negative effects of infrastructure-hungry, sprawling developments. So I was thinking that in good consciousness, I really couldn't vote in favor of this. So I'm glad it's been raised as an issue by this committee.
Thank you. I have Director Staples, then Douglas.
At this point, I don't feel like I want to repeat what's already been said, so it's very echoey. So what I would like to do, though, is support the line of I guess thinking that Director Nicholson was sharing about perhaps some next steps. And because of the things that Director Justice has just mentioned, I too feel the same way and really struggle with being able to support this, given all that has changed and given the fact that, you know, we've been talking about regional planning, and this is why we need to have it. And so it just doesn't make sense on so many levels. And again, I won't add to what's been said because I think it was said very eloquently and to the point.
Thanks, Director Douglas.
Yes, similar to Director Staples, I won't repeat the previous comments that were raised. You know, I am being, despite being a municipal director, I am asked to vote on this. I just don't have the information to feel comfortable supporting the recommendation as is. I understand from speaking to one of the former planners with the regional district that when this was approved back in 2008, there were significant concerns raised by the public, by local First Nations, and what I was told was that the planning department here at the CVRD actually recommended strongly against this. So if I'm going to be voting on this, I would like more information, and if there's a way to, as Director Nicholson said, bring somebody in from the province to speak to the concerns around water access, I think that would be helpful. And as Director Staples mentioned, we have been discussing regional planning at this table for some time now, and you know, it would be great to see that any of these major developments as they move forward fit into a broader plan for our entire region around what makes sense for locations for future development, especially at this, that involves this number of residences. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. I don't know if anybody on staff wants to interject. I'll go through my speakers list. And then I'll have some words to share too that might be in contrast to those we've heard so far. Director Manhas, then Toporowski, and then myself.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will be speaking in contrast to what's been said already. I grew up in Pauldy. My grandfather came there in 1919. It was a thriving community, and we just want to make it a thriving community again. And there's lots of people that grew up in Pauldy, moved away, and now their children, grandchildren have expressed interest in buying property, buying a lot there, and we're moving back there, and I definitely would too. I've told the proponents of this that I definitely buy a lot there and move back to my old heritage place where I grew up. As Director Morrison had mentioned, this is just a housekeeping exercise, and the water, I think, has been taken care of. I think the province has given a permit to the proponents, and as Director Nicholson also mentioned, the Cowichan Tribes has mentioned and they want to actually tap into that water well for their future developments. So I support this. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Toporowski, and then Wilson, and then myself.
Thank you, Chair. And just following up from the conversation, the first thing I'm going to talk about is the well. Cowichan Tribes was voicing their concern. I don't know if Ian can hear me, but they're voicing their concern strongly about their well maybe going dry with future development happening next door. And I think that was at that time, as Director Douglas had mentioned, talking to the past person that was in charge of all of that around when that conversation came forward. It was really strongly, and again, they're worried about their own development out there because they know that the aquifer, the question was about the aquifer, and echoing what Director Nicholson had mentioned about more information about the aquifer, and I know the province has done more studies, gotten information about wells and all of those different things. So that's another thing that, again, as Director Justice has mentioned, this goes before the Electoral Directors Committee, and then it comes here for us to make a decision on. So again, some of those things are unanswered for me right now, in supporting this motion. And yeah, so just the question about that, and I do understand that, the Paldy development there had wanted to build there. And again, so if there's anything of supporting from Cowichan Tribes saying that they're in favor of, supporting this, I'm all for that, but I don't have that information. So if staff can answer that question, or the chair.
I'm going to go to Mr. Brown, who just gave me a flag right at a good time.
Thank you.
So I don't know if if you're able to answer that question and/or maybe some of the questions that have been raised.
Thank you, Chair Stone. I'll do my best here, and then, of course, colleagues from Utilities are here who authored the report that's actually before you today. So with respect to why this item is being considered by the board, or it's being brought to the board, land use decisions do fall to electoral area services committees, or to provide that recommendation, and ultimately the directors vote on it at this board. However, what's before you today is in relation to the potential establishment of a servicing bylaw. And in that case, that is decisions of the board to make as a whole. So there's a little bit of interplay there between what's an electoral area land use decision and then what is the servicing and the requirements that potentially go along with that for the creation of service areas. I do want to be a little bit mindful that some of the discussion around Cowichan Tribes' interests and the relationship that they have with the developer is potentially private information and conversation between them. However, we do know that they have an agreement with Elkridge Estates, which is the developer for the Paldy land that brought forward the petition for the establishment of the service area, and they are working together on the licensing for the well for the province. So there is an agreement in place. There's clear dialogue there, and staff have been working with both those parties to get a better understanding of what that agreement looks like, and making sure that that information will flow up through you to directors when we have a sort of a complete grasp of what that looks like. So to answer that particular question, Cowichan Tribes is in continual dialogue with the developer, does have a relationship there, and has shown a willingness to connect with CVRD staff and also provincial staff on those conversations with respect to the well. The zoning for this did come into effect in 2008. It encompasses 7 parcels in total. And at the time it was envisioned as and I provide this as a way of information because it is a little bit confusing. It was intended to be developed comprehensively, all 7 parcels. However, due to the circumstances that do happen with developments, there was a change in ownership when the original developer no longer had the financing or the wherewithal to proceed, and the properties did go up for sale. That resulted in an ownership change, and now the 7 parcels are owned by 3 different ownership groups. 2 of the owners own 1 parcel each, and then the third ownership group owns the remainder. Ideally, of course, we'd love to see a coordinated development as originally envisioned, but at this time, that is not what is materializing, and there's one development group which brought forward this petition that is more advanced with respect to proceeding with the conditions required to proceed. And I think finally, and if there's more questions, Chair, I'm happy to answer them. What is before you today is essentially the due diligence required if anyone was to bring forward a petition to establish a service area. So what's on the agenda today is not a vote on whether to establish the service area or not. Attachment A of the report from Utilities laid out a series of conditions that would need to be met by the proponent, which includes everything from a utility transfer agreement, if the CVRD is to take over the system and what that looks like, and spelling out those details, and even considerations around asset management and all sorts of items. So I think there was a previous board motion that maybe didn't articulate what those considerations or those conditions might be maybe as tight as we would have liked them to be. And so this report that was brought forward by the Utilities Decision essentially fulfilled our commitment for the CVRD to receive that petition, but also say if we're going to advance these conversations, we want to make sure we're doing it in a responsible way. And that's attachment A of that report that went to the EASC, outlined those conditions at a high level, but provided a level of detail that, one, the proponent can go away with, and also the board can have confidence that if we are to present you with bylaws around establishing a service area, a certain amount of due diligence has been done, so we know that there's a certain viability from a whole host of everything from the monitoring of water and those relational items I was just talking about, to respective and all the way towards the practicalities of taking on a system and the assets and the financial aspects that go along with that. And I'll just finish on the water discussion. I think is very top of mind. We know that from Cowichan Tribes and the history there. We know from past discussions with the CVRD, but also very top of the mind with the province with respect to how they issue this license and any water license. That regime has really changed in the last half decade. And I think even much more with respect to the provincial government and adopting DRIPA and how that interface between water and water approvals plays with First Nations. So they are very mindful of that, and they are not they're not simply granting the license because someone applied. There's a whole host of conditions that need to be met with respect to referrals to First Nations, but also establishing monitoring regimes that make sure that if there is any approvals in place, that additional approvals are not granted where there's adverse impacts to groundwater and surface water. So, Chair, I hope that, forgive sort of the length there, but there was a lot of things discussed, and I hope that context answers some of the questions and provides a better, little more information than just simply the agenda item.
Thank you. I have Director Wilson next, and then myself on the list.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Oh, he's gone. Thank you, staff. That's all right. I think one of the key phrases that was brought up there just now was presenting this in a responsible way, and I think that's actually what has been done here. That we do have a department, an environmental department here, that was headed up by Kate Miller, and she was in charge of the DWWP, the Drinking Water and Watershed Protection, and I think that probably had quite a big input on this as well. I'm going to be careful what I say here, but I've not been happy with some of the provincial input that I've been getting in my efforts to try and protect aquifers. They are at arm's length. They don't have the local knowledge that we do. So I'm not sure that any more input from the province is going to be any assistance. But having said that, I will support this because I think it's the way to move forward. And as long as we stick to the conditions that have been laid down and make sure that we monitor in a responsible way what's going on, then I think this should go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And just from my piece, actually, Mr. Brown just answered sort of my question was this, I understood this as sort of a procedural step forward that will allow the necessary analysis, collaboration, and dialogue to continue. So my predisposition, having read this and watched the meeting, was to support this and look forward to what comes next. And that would inform, I think, better decision-making by all parties involved. And I'm also very mindful of, the landscape is changing around what I would have said in the past was development rights or property rights. When somebody buys a piece of property that is zoned, empowered with certain abilities and conditions, of course, that come with those, to at least have due process of being able to go through a fair and equitable process as lined out when they purchase a piece of development property that is zoned and put forward in a certain way. If that's not the goal of the region, then the zoning should be changed in advance of applications coming in, and to sort of move the goalposts for me is really challenging when people have invested sometimes life savings or investment monies in hopes of moving a project forward. I feel like from what I understand of this, not only the past, but the present, and more importantly, perhaps the future, is that there are hurdles that need to be overcome for this to move forward. And the questions that I've heard here should be answered appropriately through those processes. So it's not like me to enter into much to say about an issue like this, but having heard some of my other municipal colleagues, I felt it was incumbent on me to share my perspective. Any further discussion? Director Nicholson.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I'm also, having listened to Mr. Brown, we're also we'll have a responsibility when we take over this water system, and we need to be able to make sure that things that are going ahead, we'll be able to manage, 30 years down the road in an okay way. And I think we need to stop for something like this in this day and age and just do some serious due diligence about what we think the natural capacity is to handle this level of development in this area. Given that the water is everything's connected, and this is the Cowichan, and the aquifer under Duncan is part of the Cowichan system. We need to really understand and think about what makes sense and take the lower risk areas where we push development. And I just would like us to do that before it moves any farther forward. And I think that by putting in place these conditions, these might not be adequate given to the situation today. And the CVRD will be taking on this water system. So, we have a long-term responsibility on how we look at this kind of a thing now. And we're not really set up to do it very well. So I'm looking at trying to figure out a new way forward. And I really, without a regional growth strategy where that work would have been done, we need to think about how we can deal with this particular development, I think, differently.
Thank you. I'm seeing no further hands, and I'm not one to debate my colleagues. Sorry, I don't, no, he's waving me off. I would just say that if we wanted regional growth strategy, we need to move forward with it. We can't cast forward our ideals and ideas outside of the legislation we have in place today, saying we should have a regional growth strategy. If we should have it, we should have it. But that being said, I think we've all said our piece. Well, hopefully we can all hug it out after. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? And opposed?
Could you keep that on?
I can read them, yep. Opposed, I have Director Abbott, Segal, Toporowski, Justice, Nicholson, Deck, Staples, and Douglas. It's 8. It's a tie, so it fails. I'd look to staff if there's any recommendations. Having a defeated motion like that is, I think, challenging for any process.
It was described in the report from the Utilities Division that there was a previous set of conditions adopted by the board in 2017, so those would still stand. Another option is to today pass the acceptance of items 1 to 4, the certificates of sufficiency, and postponing a decision on the conditions for moving forward. And staff do intend to bring forward a report. Mr. Brown gave some information on the development, but we do have an intention to bring forward a report to Committee of the Whole in September, giving an overview of the entire Paldie comprehensive development and some of the other conditions that were secured through covenants in the original rezoning.
Thank you. So having just defeated those motions to approve those certificates of sufficiency, Ms. Boyd, legislatively, if there is a desire to move forward, what would that be?
Mr. Chair, if I may?
Yes,
A reconsideration of that vote would be
And
appropriate?
then a motion, if reconsideration will put it back on the floor,
Correct,
and then it could be severed?
correct.
Okay, well, I'm going to test the House. If there's a motion to reconsider, it's moved by Director Wilson, seconded by Director Morrison. I don't think we need to rediscuss it. So this motion would put it back on the floor, and then the board has the option to sever 1 through 4 from 5 and 6. I'm going to call the question on the motion to reconsider. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. So the original motion's back on the floor. Should we just call it again and see what happens? No, I'm just kidding, sorry. Sorry, I was trying to lighten the mood a little bit. Maybe inappropriately. I feel the tension. I think we should take a recess while this is on the floor. I'm kidding. So I'm going to ask for a motion to sever 1 through 4. That's been moved by Director Wilson, seconded by Director Morrison. So what's the appropriate procedure on a motion to sever if there's speakers on it?
Same as the discussion, if you like.
Okay, Director Nicholson.
Maybe staff could just explain what one would be approving when we talk about certificates of sufficiency.
Mr. Brown, you're on the hot seat, or the
Yeah,
hot stand.
well, I would defer to my utility staff or the legislative service staff if I get this wrong, but you're essentially just receiving for information. Anyone can bring forward a petition, and so it's just to receive that. Ultimately, it's a little bit redundant because, of course, you've received it, but it has been presented to the board. So, and then with respect to that other one, Ms. Pressman did highlight that there was an existing board motion that did lay a series of conditions already. Staff felt that it was just a little bit inadequate in terms of due diligence, and this provided additional clarity, and that I think was the housekeeping referred to, was to refine it and make it better so that we could actually present you with better information. If that motion is defeated, ultimately that other motion will still stand as a motion of the board. I again would defer to Leg Services staff if that is correct, but
Yeah, well,
but so I just present that as just for the board's
Context.
information. Yes.
okay. Director Wilson on the motion to sever.
Actually, it's a clarification on what Mr. Brown just said, if I could, please.
Yeah.
Mr. Brown, just so I got this absolutely clear in my head here and I understood, the motion that was brought forward in 2017 was approved by the board. This motion which has been forward, if I heard you correctly, is more clarification and strengthening, for want of a better word, of that motion. Is that correct?
In staff's opinion, yes.
Okay, so if we therefore defeat this one, we go back to the 2017 one, which is weaker than the one which is brought forward now.
Through you, Chair, to the Director, that would be correct unless the board provided alternate direction in which, of course, staff would follow.
Okay, so basically, it's all I needed to know. 2017 is weaker than the one which is 2023. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Director Morrison and then back to Director Nicholson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think this may be out of context, but it's very clear to me that our defeated motion, our tied motion, had some directors voting with insufficient information around items that have already been considered in it wasn't a unanimous vote, but a fairly heavily weighted vote in favor at electoral area services. A little off context of the motion to sever, but I'm wanting to ask how we might resolve into closed so that some of the issues around water and what is being done is made available to the municipal directors that seem to have issues around water agreements and the likes that Mr. Brown touched on, but obviously couldn't go into any further detail due to the private nature of the agreements.
So right now, we do have a motion to sever on the floor. After that, a motion could be made by any director, I believe, to resolve into closed session. We would then, if that passed, close the meeting, shut down the cameras, and go into closed session, and then return from closed session at the end of that discussion, if that was the motion that was made.
Not to challenge the chair, but could this be referred to closed session and then come out of closed after we have further discussion?
I'd have to go through the legislative services. I thought that's what I just said. Just that there was the motion to sever on the floor.
Referral motion takes precedence.
Yep. Okay, so you would be suggesting referring it to closed session after the meeting or immediately?
Sorry, after the meeting.
Okay, well, if you're making that referral motion, but you just said the referral motion takes precedence over the sever motion, so if he makes the referral motion, okay. So
That's what I'm doing.
okay, do we have a seconder on the motion to refer to closed? Seconded by Director Wilson. Now on the motion to refer to closed, so don't say too much that you can't say in an open meeting. Does anybody want to discuss the propriety of referral? What looked like such a simple afternoon. Ideologies always get us. I'm going to call the question on the motion to refer. All those in favor? Any opposed? Director Deck opposed? No. Okay. Okay. So it's been referred to closed. At least we're moving on in open. We'll discuss it in closed session after the open portion of the meeting. And then I believe we'd rise from closed back into open to resume discussion on the item, which has a motion to sever on it. Oh, and it'll be section 90Y to close. Why? Because section 90Y. All right. Well, electoral area directors, you're up next. Back to Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just just discussing what's going on with my colleague by the side of me. So this will be for electoral areas directors only, and this would be items 6 through 12. And is there any of those that anyone would like to pull?
I don't see anyone wishing to pull any of those items if you'd like to make the motion for the whole batch.
In that case, I would like to make the motion that we
6 through
vote
12.
on 6 through 12. Thank you.
Seconded by Director Segal. Any discussion? You sure? Come on, we're off to a hot start. No? Call the question. All those in favor, electoral area directors only. Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. CR3, Ms. Boyd.
Thank you, Chair. Report and recommendations of the Committee of the Whole meeting from this morning. Director Morrison.
Director Morrison, it's printed on our agendas, but not for those at home perhaps, so maybe you could read those items out?
I
Oh, you
can
don't
if
have
you
them.
would like.
How about I do that, because you haven't got a printed copy in front of you?
That would be wonderful.
Thank you. Ms. Boyd will do it for us, because you just offered. You go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Recommendation, again, I'd just like to confirm this is non-weighted vote of the board. And this is a recommendation that the operating reserves for Function 320, Building Inspection, Function 325, Community Planning, and Function 328, Bylaw Enforcement, be prioritized for the land management system implementation in 2023 and 2024. 2, that the 2023 budget be amended by A, increasing Function 320 transfer from operating reserves by $267,574.51, and increasing Function 320 consultants by $267,574.51. B, increasing Function 325 transfer from operating reserves by $155,024.51, and increasing Function 325 consultants by $155,024.51. And C, increasing Function 328 transfer from operating reserves by $219,051, and increasing Function 328 consultants by $219,051. 3, that the 2024 budget for Function 310, including $72,000 for the land management system dog licensing module. And 4, that the previous resolution to commit $370,000 from Function 325 Operating Reserves 2020 Supplemental be rescinded.
Moved by Director Morrison, seconded by Director McClinton. Any discussion? Seeing none, if you want to watch that discussion, just go back to this morning. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Staff reports.
No director's reports, number 10, and 11 staff reports. SR1, report from the Strategic Initiatives Division regarding Regional District of Nanaimo Regional Growth Strategy Amendment, Shaping Our Future 2040, Bylaw 1871, 2023, informal referral.
And the recommendation?
The recommendation that the Regional District of Nanaimo be advised that the Cowichan Valley Regional District provide the following comments on the informal referral of the draft Regional Growth Strategy Shaping Our Future 2040 Bylaw number 1871, 2023. The Regional Growth Strategy as amended in generally consistent with all CVRD member municipalities and electoral area official community plans.
Moved by Director Segal, seconded by Director Wilson. It's just everybody's hands, everybody was like pregnant pause. That, oh, nobody's paying attention. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Ms. Boyd.
SR2, report from the Communications and Engagement RE 2022 Annual Report, a recommendation for information.
Oh, man, I should have had the entrance song queued up. I see Mr. Schumacher is there. This is here for information or questions. It's our annual report, not a requirement of regional districts, but of municipalities. But we have been doing this for as long as I can remember. And Mr. Schumacher stayed on me enough and helped me enough to get a report from the chair in there as well. So I appreciate that due diligence on keeping me on track. Director Douglas, got a problem with the letter?
No, it's the recommendation says information, so I mistakenly assumed we had to accept it. So
Oh, that's okay.
ignore me.
No. I usually do, but not today. I'm paying lots of attention. Any discussion, any questions? Not seeing any. Thanks for hanging out and waiting for us, Mr. Schumacher. Appreciate the good work. So I will just say for information. No, we're good. We experienced one of your reports this morning, thank you. I'm still tired. Sorry, I should just say, we have a special relationship. For those at home or other colleagues, please don't file a code of conduct complaint against me. If it was offside, Mr. Schumacher will deal with me separately. I hope it's all good, sir. Thank you. All right, moving on.
Thank you, Chair. 12, public hearings. PH1, public hearing minutes, CVRD bylaw 4480, South Cowichan zoning amendment bylaw, 3280 Trans-Canada Highway 2023. The recommendation that the CVRD bylaw 4480, South Cowichan zoning amendment bylaw 3280 Trans-Canada Highway 2023 be received.
Moved by Director Segal, seconded by Director Wilson. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries.
Thank you. Public hearing minutes of CVRD bylaw 4481, Electoral Area D, Cowichan Bay Upland Zoning Amendment bylaw. Minutes that the recommendation, CVRD bylaw 4481, Electoral Area D, Cowichan Bay Upland Zoning Amendment bylaw PID 009141600 and PID 009142738 2023 be received.
Moved by Director Abbott, seconded by Director Segal. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries.
Thank you. Public hearing 3, that the public hearing minutes of CVRD bylaw 4486, Electoral Area A, Mill Bay, Malahat, and Electoral Area C, Cobble Hill, South Cowichan zoning amendment bylaw, Suites Amendment 2023, that the CVRD bylaw 4486, Electoral A, Mill Bay, Malahat, and Electoral Area C, Cobble Hill, South Cowichan zoning amendment bylaw, Suites Amendment 2023 be received.
Moved by Director Segal, seconded by Director Wilson. Director Wilson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a great step forward in the right direction in trying to ease some of the housing problems that we've got, and I'm really glad that staff have moved this forward as quickly as they can, so thank you to them.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Ms. Boyd.
Thank you. Moving to 13 of bylaws. This is an all-board one vote that the CVRD bylaw number 4506 Shell Beach Water System Service Area Establishment Bylaw 2023 be granted first, second, and third reading.
Director Martman's not here to move it, so Director Nicholson moved, seconded by Director Toporowski. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries.
Thank you. This is a all-board weighted vote that the CVRD bylaw 4507 Shell Beach Water System Service Loan Authorization water treatment upgrades of $275,000 bylaw 2023 be granted first, second, and third reading.
Moved by, it's all board, Director Nicholson, seconded by Director McClinton. I was going to call you Director McMartin. I got a really bad headache, so I'm just trying to laugh my way through it. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Ms. Boyd.
Thank you, Chair. 14 bylaws, electoral area directors. The first one, BEA 1, that CVRD bylaw 4480 South Couch and zoning amendment bylaw 3280 Trans-Canada Highway 2023 be granted third reading.
Moved by Director Nicholson, seconded by Director Segal. What are you guys all texting or something? Seeing none, no discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries.
Thank you. BEA 2, CVRD bylaw 4481 electoral area D, Couch and Bay Upland zoning amendment bylaw PID 009141600 and PID 009142738 be granted third reading.
Moved by Director Abbott, seconded by Director Segal. Any discussion? Director Abbott and Director Nicholson.
Thank you, Chair. I do wish to comment. A public hearing was held on May 30th about this proposal, where verbal and written submissions, both for and against for the proposal, were provided. Reflecting upon the existing official community plan backed up by the October 2021 local area plan for Coquesilla Village, it encourages decision makers to follow the objectives and policies set out for this area, which include establishing vibrant, aesthetically appealing mixed-use businesses, which will support the local economy and local employment. Moreover, a stated objective in the local area plan, or LAP, is to increase community amenities for residents, business owners, and employees of Coquesilla Village. And a stated policy within the LAP is to establish zoning standards for neighborhood pub, wine sales, or liquor sales. I contend valid concerns were raised by members of the community that these concerns can be addressed and mitigated by working collaboratively with different agencies and other levels of government. I believe the proposed development is in keeping with the official community plan and the local area plan. I feel this proposal will be a valuable addition to Coquesilla Village.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And Director Nicholson.
Yeah, this is a very interesting one because it's down in the Coquesilla Village in the sort of industrial business, light industrial business area it's got a significant amount of residential. And lots of people in the minutes noted the traffic issues and so forth. And it's, it just points to our huge challenge we have dealing with the fact that we have no control over roads in electoral areas. And it doesn't work when you're in a very densely developed area, but I am certainly really looking forward to the doing a local area plan for the Coquesilla Village, Eagle Heights area. I think that should be a huge priority for the CVRD, and we're having our visioning in the fall. So if anyone who lives out there is listening, do get involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? We're all talkative today. Call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries.
Moving to BEA 3, that's CVRD bylaw number 4486, electoral area A, Mill Bay Malahat electoral area C, Cobble Hill South Couch and zoning amendment bylaw, Sweets Amendment 2023 be granted third reading.
Moved by Director Wilson, seconded by Director Segal. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries.
BEA 4, that's CVRD bylaw 4490, Cobble Hill Village Sewer System Service Amendment Boundary Extension bylaw 2023 be granted first, second, and third reading.
Moved by Director Wilson, seconded by Director Segal. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries.
BEA 5, that's CVRD bylaw number 4505, Cowichan Bay Critical Location Street Lighting Service Amendment Requisition Limit Increase bylaw 2023 be granted first, second, and third readings.
Moved by Director Abbott, seconded by Director Segal. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries.
Moving on, we have no resolutions, unfinished business, notice of motion, or new business, and we move to number 19, question period. Question period is allocated 15 minutes, and questioners are permitted to ask one question of the chair and one follow-up question.
And I owe Ms. Kaufman an answer, so I'll get to that after she asks me more questions that I'll probably have to bring back to the next meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I look forward to that. Question, and I'm sorry I've forgotten, it's with the Paldy water servicing. I heard a lot of talk about, and I'm getting to my question, about the property owners and people that wish to see this village reestablished. But what I didn't hear was how the water, the density of that development is going to affect the residents of the surrounding properties. Will that be addressed at some point?
I knew I was going to have to probably get some information from staff, and I probably will in about 20 minutes or 15 minutes whenever we get out of here. But yes, I'll say my understanding is that through changes to the well licensing process, there does have to be some analysis done, not only on its ability to provide water to the prescribed developments, but also how it would impact adjacent properties. But I will get back to you on that with certainty, because that's not my bailiwick, obviously, and I don't want to give you false information. So I'm looking around to see if nobody will make eye contact with me. So I will follow up, and probably in 2 weeks we'll have this conversation again, but I'll be hopefully answering your question more informatively.
Thank you for that. I'm sure those property owners would be most interested to know. My second question, will you be rising and reporting from your closed session on this matter?
We'll be actually, because the motion that was on the floor is still valid until we referred it to close. So once we come back out of close, that discussion will resume.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, well, I was going to say, you want to stay there? Well, then we'll get into this back and forth where you ask me more questions I can't answer. Well, I'm just going to give you the response that was provided, and this goes back to the discussion around the boat launch and the ancillary pieces there in Shawnigan. So, and I think around Malahat's interests and concerns, and the other parts of it. So in terms of the Shawnigan boat relocation feasibility assessment, now that the preliminary work is completed by the CVRD's consulting engineers, they've determined that a public boat launch and updated parking could feasibly be built at West Shawnigan Lake Provincial Park, as noted in the staff report to June 7th electoral area services. The next steps are with BC Parks with respect to Malahat Nation's interests in exploring shared management opportunities with West Shawnigan Lake Provincial Park and the province's commitment to negotiate on a park collaborative management agreement under the 2015 Treaty Association Agreement in Principle. So respecting that process, the CVRD will be following up with BC Parks specifically in regard to the public boat launch relocation interest and how this could be incorporated into the process. There's no additional funding being considered at this time by the board for work on relocating a boat launch, pending the outcome of the follow-up discussions with BC Parks. If that's insufficient, just shoot me back an email that I just sent you this one, and I can find out more details.
Thank you very much for that. It was just wanting to make sure that all interests were being addressed. And will that be made available to the public?
I would think at an appropriate time that it would come back to the board because there's not funding allocated to the project or anything. So through that discussion process, reports would come back probably to ESC and then to the board. And I have a feeling you'll probably see them when they come forward. But if there is more detail, I'll forward that response to you so you have it.
Thank
and
you.
then you can always follow up with me by email.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Appreciated.
Thanks, Ms. Kaufman. Any more folks for question period before we take a motion to go into closed under all the reasons Ms. Boyd's about to tell us? Seeing none, Ms. Boyd.
Thank you, Chair. The question period's over with. We'll move into closed section with motion that the meeting be closed to the public in accordance with the Community Charter, Part 4, Division 3, Section 90, subsections as noted in accordance with each agenda item. CSM 1 closed session regular board minutes of June 28th, 2023. CSCR 1 law enforcement, that would be Section 91F, and negotiations, Section 91K. CSSR 1 labor and employee relations of Section 91C, and the referral new business, Section 90K, consideration of a new service.
I thought it was 90Y. Oh, Y, but because 90K. Sorry, I didn't know. I never heard of a Y90. Yeah, okay. Motion to go into close, moved by Director Nicholson, seconded by Director Segal. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? We are in closed. We'll take a 7-minute recess, be back at 2:45 for close. Thank you.